In this chapter, we look at the classical debate about design type arguments, particularly focusing on the figures of William Paley and David Hume. William Paley famously defended a design type argument and has this very famous image of discovering a watch on a heath and saying, how would you explain it? And then drawing a comparison between that watch and the need to explain it and the natural biological world. David Hume had some very famous critiques of design type arguments, and we look at the sort of interplay between those issues in the classical discussion, whilst keeping one eye on the more contemporary discussion about design arguments, particularly in terms of intelligent design theory type thinking. A teleological argument is a long way of saying design argument. The ancient Greek term telos meant a goal or a purpose. So teleological reasoning about goals and purposes from the ancient Greek. So you can see how that can apply to thinking in terms of explaining things in terms of being designed for a purpose, or things working together to achieve a goal, implying they're being designed for a purpose. A great many people will say that William Paley's design argument is an argument by analogy. That is an argument where you say, look, things of type 1 have a whole bunch of qualities, including, in this case, being designed. Here's something that which we're now going to sort of make a comparison and say it has lots of points of analogy with things of type 1. Therefore, it probably also has the quality of being designed that we know things of type 1 have. So we draw a comparison and we say there's lots of points of analogy between these two things, and therefore probably what applies in case 1 in terms of its designedness, well, that probably follows in case 2 as well. I think that's a misinterpretation of Paley's argument. What I think Paley actually does is he sets forth some carefully defined criteria, some tests, if you like, that you can apply to things to say, does this thing give empirical evidence of being designed? If it passes the test, then it is, at least most likely, the product of design. And that's not an argument from analogy, but rather an argument from having identical properties in common, saying here is a set of particular properties that if something has, then it's probably designed. So he's not making an argument by analogy, I think, but rather putting forward some empirical criteria or tests for designedness. I think Paley puts forward two sort of overlapping criteria. One is a version of what in the contemporary discussion we would refer to as irreducible complexity. That is, where you have a number of different parts that have to all be working together in a very tight-knit kind of way in order to achieve a particular purpose. And Paley says where you find many parts working together to achieve a particular purpose beyond themselves, that is an empirical indicator of design. And he also then points to what we could call added beauty. This is where there's some facet of the design of thing that goes beyond the pragmatic needs of the object in terms of just accomplishing its goal, or something that has that outstrips the sort of natural selection being good enough to get selected for. It's sort of an overabundance of design or ability to accomplish a goal, or he points to in terms of his watch analogy. He says there are certain things that the watch has to have all of these parts working together in order that it can tell the time, and that's the irreducible complexity. But then he also says, look, there are things about this watch that it has that it doesn't need in order to tell the time or accomplish any kind of pragmatic goal. The fact that it has say a beautiful filigree work or a nice painting on the watch face or something like this, it seems to have things about it that can't be easily explained in terms of its pragmatic value, some sort of aesthetic value, which points to an aesthetically attuned designer. I think Paley, having laid out his criteria, wasn't particularly careful about how he applied the criteria. So in the application of the criteria, I think he could have been more careful, and also in terms of how big a conclusion he thought he could get out of the argument. And I think here Hume's criticisms are correct, but they are kind of slimming rather than starving of what the argument could achieve. I think Hume's right when he says with this kind of argument you have to be careful that you don't try and get out more in a conclusion than the evidence will support getting out. So Paley wanted his design argument to show the existence of a creator with certain moral characteristics, for example. And Hume would say, well, no, look, maybe you can tell that there's a designer who must have enough power, enough intelligence to produce these things that you're looking at, but you couldn't say that he's omnipotent or that he's omniscient, or say much about the moral character of the designer simply from looking at things. Indeed, raising the whole issue of the morality of the designer is a bit of a red herring in terms of the actual design argument, because you can't simply say, look at a torture instrument and say, well, anyone who designed that couldn't be very good, therefore it's not designed. So the design argument only points to certain qualities of the designer, enough intelligence and power to produce that design, and anything beyond that you want to get into the discussion about what further qualities does this designer have in terms of morality, in terms of how much power and so on. You'd be into other discussions about other kinds of arguments, I think.